Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Just talked some SEC potential college football playoff contenders. Did those kind of question mark teams, did they do enough to get over the hump? We're going to have to find out when the season starts. But continuing on the college football playoff trend, I want to talk about two Big Ten teams that I think are pretty similar, but they're both kind of knocking on that door in Illinois and Indiana. So, first of all, these teams are going to play each other on September 20th at Indiana in Bloomington. Going to be a really exciting matchup. That's really Indiana's big first test of the season. They have a couple of non-conference games before that. They have a couple of non-conference games before that should be kind of tune-ups for them. Illinois got a little bit of a tougher start to the season, but this is going to be a big-time matchup at the end of September, at the end of that first month. In Indiana, I kind of really like this Indiana team right now. So they obviously do lose quarterback Curtis Rourke. However, how do you replace that guy? You go get another big-time transfer quarterback in Fernando Mendoza from Cal, a dude that was one of the top quarterbacks on the portal after last season, kind of really showcased his talent at Cal, where he threw for 3,000 yards, had 16 touchdowns in the season, and also just had a couple of really big moments too. He was able to come back against Stanford last year, really drive that comeback, really had an impressive performance against Miami as well. But a guy that I really like as a quarterback, I think he's a gamer. We're going to talk a little bit more about Fernando Mendoza later on in the show. But a really good quarterback that Indiana picks up. I think he's an upgrade over Curtis Rourke, so that's a big point there. Then you look at O-line. This could be one of the strengths of their team. So they do return left tackle Carter Smith, who has kind of been their incumbent starter since 2023. There could be a couple transfers here, though, that are going to start. Pat Coogan, big name coming in from Notre Dame at center, should kind of anchor that role. Then you also have Bray Lynch, probably going to be the left guard. Zen Mikulski, transferred in from Ohio State, could potentially take over that right tackle role. So you have a couple of big-time former blue-chip prospects and guys in Pat Coogan who are experienced starters, should really solidify that offensive line. I think this is going to be a really good offensive unit. You also have wide receivers Elijah Surratt coming back, E.J. Williams coming back, super dependable targets, Omar Cooper Jr. as well. And then they brought in a few transfer wideouts too to really kind of bolster that room. I think this offense is going to be really great. Defense, the D-line might be a little more shaky. C.J. West is gone. James Carpenter is gone. But you bring back Mikail Kamara after a huge 2024 season. This guy is a stud. Had 10 sacks last year, 47 total tackles. He's only 6'1", but he's 265. He's got a really sturdy frame. And he also led the FBS last year with 68 pressures on the quarterback. He's also going to be switching positions. He's going to move to they call it the stud position, kind of a hybrid D-end linebacker role, a stand-up edge guy. But it's really going to allow him to focus more on rushing the passer, which could honestly make his stats look even better. I think those sack numbers could go up. This could be a 12-13 kind of sack type of guy. Quarterback pressures, I don't know if you can really improve after you led the country in quarterback pressures, but I don't know. We're going to see if he can do it. I think that'd be kind of cool. And then at the D-tackle position, they brought in a couple transfers to solidify that in Jose Wheeler and Dominique Ratcliffe, guys that came in that are going to be names to watch there, should really help solidify that. Running back's going to be a little bit of a question mark for them. Going to be relying on Kalen Black, as well as transfers Roman Hemby, Lee Beebe Jr. They should kind of mix in there for the roles. I don't think this is going to be a one running back type situation. I think this is going to be kind of a community by backfield. We're going to see who's playing the best. That's who's going to get the carries here. They did lose a couple their starting safeties. They brought in a couple transfers there, though. Devin Boykin, as well as Lewis Moore. Lewis Moore actually is a guy that was at Indiana, transferred to Ole Miss, and now he transferred back to Indiana. So a guy that could potentially take over those roles. And then you have Amari Farrell, too. Amari Farrell returns. He's going to be in the mix somewhere, playing there somewhere on that defense. But this is a team that stunned the college football world last year. Curt Cignetti's first season as their head coach, won 10 games. However, it's going to be difficult for them to replicate that season from last year. Yeah, their non-conference schedule, not bad. They have Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State to start the year before that Illinois matchup. But you have 3 really, really tough road games, and you got to go to Iowa to play the Hawkeyes. You have to go to Eugene to play the Oregon Ducks, and you got to go to Happy Valley and play Penn State. I think this could be an 8-4, 9-3 type team for Indiana. This is going to be a tough schedule for them to get through. Then you have Illinois. Illinois quietly won 10 games last season in the Big Ten. And then I still don't know if they're getting enough credit as a potential contender in the Big 12. You look at their returning production. Only Clemson and Arizona State are returning more production at the FBS level. Illinois is bringing back 76% of their returning production. Over 3/4 of that production is returning. So you have an experienced team, a team that performed well last year and is retaining a lot of those guys. You have Luke Altmaier at quarterback. Going to talk about him a little later on in the show, but a guy that's a stud will be the leader there. You also have all 5 starting O-linemen returning, the entire starting secondary returning, and you bring back your star linebacker in Gabe Jackas, who is returning for his 4th year as kind of a big type role. He's been a player there the past 3 seasons. Last year had 74 total tackles, 8 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, a guy to really watch out for on that defense. Receiver, kind of a question mark here. They need to find new playmakers. There's a couple guys, Malik Elzy, he might be a potential starter here. And then running back, too, they lost Josh McCray, their leading rusher from last year, left in the spring portal to go to Georgia. So they still have a couple guys. Caden Fegan's one of those dudes, but that's a question mark. After you lose your leading rusher in the spring, kind of a tough time to lose them. And then they did add on defense. They added a handful of vet defensive linemen. James Thompson Jr. from Wisconsin. That's going to be one of the big guys for them. He had 5 sacks for Wisconsin the past couple of seasons. However, their schedule is a lot more manageable than Indiana's. So their biggest road matchup might be their non-conference game against Duke, and I believe it's week 2. It's week 2 or 3. It's early on in the season. Or it could be that Indiana matchup where they have to go to Bloomington early on in September, and then potentially the Washington game. Washington's kind of a toss-up for me, but you get OSU and USC at home this year. You also avoid Michigan, Penn State, Oregon. So Ohio State and Indiana are really your 2 biggest, toughest matchups, and then Duke for them too. I think that could be a good game where I think Duke's a good team. I think they could beat Illinois, especially because it's at Duke, but they're Illinois' 9 Big Ten opponents this season, they were a combined 33-48 in Big Ten play in 2024. Only 2 of those teams in Indiana and Ohio State had a winning Big Ten record. So this is a very manageable schedule for Illinois. I'm curious about the defense here. I think that's the big difference between these 2 teams right now. If you look at the 2024 defensive stats for both Indiana and Illinois, there's a big difference. In total defense, Indiana was number 2 in the country last year in terms of total defense at the FBS level, whereas Illinois was only 68th. You look at scoring defense. Indiana, again, top 10 at number 6 in the country. Illinois, we're at 31st. Third down defense, big factor. Indiana's 15th in the country. Illinois, 113th in the country. And then turnover margin. Indiana was the number 3 team in the country at plus 15 in terms of turnover margin. Illinois was tied at 35th at plus 6. So Indiana, despite they didn't have bad defensive stats, I'd say, or Illinois didn't have bad defensive stats, but Indiana's were much better. That defense was much stronger overall. They are losing more pieces, but is that disparity going to continue? Will Indiana continue to have a much stronger defense? That's going to be the big question mark, I think, in between these two teams. But if you're looking at the total kind of projection, I think Illinois might be a little more likely, at least this season, to make the college football playoff. When you look at their returning production, you bring back your entire O-line, you bring back your starting quarterback for another year, and you have the momentum still. You have one of the most returning productions in terms of that team, of that roster throughout the country. You're third in returning production in the entire FBS. That's going to be big. And you look at their schedule, it's a lot easier than Indiana's. Indiana has some really tough road matchups this year. Illinois doesn't. They kind of avoid some of those really big-time Big Ten powerhouses. And I think it's a lot more easy to navigate for Illinois than it is for Indiana this upcoming season. But I'm really curious to see this September 20th matchup where Illinois goes into Bloomington, has to play the Hoosiers at their home. That's going to be a big-time matchup. It's going to be interesting, and I think it's going to tell us a lot about these two programs and kind of where they are right now. So we're going to take another quick break on the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little ACC football, dive into some of those power rankings. So stick with us. We'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.